And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com. This episode of Podcast on the Brink is brought to you by Crane Credit Union. Get a $150 deposit into your new Crane Credit Union checking account when you get e-statements, have direct deposit, and use your debit card. Plus, there's no monthly service charges and no minimum balance to open your account. Stop in at any of Crane Credit Union's 14 locations or visit their website at cranecu.org for more information. That's cranecu.org. Crane Credit Union is federally insured by NCUA. On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I run through a potpourri of offseason topics related to Indiana basketball. We talk about the narrative that we've heard a lot this season from Archie Miller about guys changing their bodies, especially Deron Davis and Curtis Jones, and what exactly that means. We talk about the incoming freshmen and what it will mean for them to have a successful summer now that they are on campus. And we update recruiting as well as look at a recent story about the Big Ten possibly moving to a 20-game schedule and what that will mean. All of that and more coming up on Podcast on the Brink. Hey, real quick, a word about this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated, but there is a better, simpler way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events because with SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There really is nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have SeatGeek on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way that I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and like I just mentioned, with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats to anything that I want to go to. I actually used SeatGeek to buy tickets earlier this year to see Yogi play here in Dallas. I bought my wife concert tickets for the summer. So SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. They save you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. Now, here's how to get an even better deal, which is Podcast on the Brink listeners get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. Download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K today, and you'll get $20 back from SeatGeek. That's promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K. And now, on with this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink. All right, Alex, what's going on, man? Just me and you for this week's episode.
Yeah, it's always fun to just chat amongst ourselves. Kind of a slow time of year right now, middle of June, but it seems like there's always something going on. I know we talked a little bit before about some of the things that have been going on recently in terms of IU basketball, and I know for both of us it makes this a 365 day a year endeavor. So fortunate for that, but a little bit slower than usual. But I'm sure things will start to heat up back soon before we know it.
No question. And it's like you never want to be the coach replacing the legend. Who wants to be the guest who comes on the week after Victor Oladipo is on? So, I don't even know who else we would have gotten. And, of course, if any of you missed last week's episode of Podcast on the Brink with Victor, make sure that you tune in to that episode. He added a lot of great insight, and we really enjoyed that conversation. So, Alex, let's just kind of go through some headlines because it is a slower time, but slower is relative because it's Indiana basketball. So even in slow times, there's still a lot of interesting kind of news and nuggets out there. And the first topic that I want to talk with you about, you actually wrote about today at InsideTheHall.com. You wrote a piece about Curtis Jones and how Archie Miller, back during the Huber's Winery event, and really at other times during the offseason as well, talked about the importance of Curtis changing his body. And I think for me, coming off of last season, Curtis's body wasn't necessarily something I was thinking much about. I was thinking more about his confidence and his skill and his shot and his defensive awareness and, a lot of those things. And I think it's easy to overlook the importance of, especially for a freshman, just that physical transition they have to make going from high school to being a major college basketball player. And that's been a theme for Deron Davis, who kind of needed to go the other direction and, lose a little bit of weight, get a little bit more svelte, get his conditioning up. And then Curtis kind of needs to go in the other direction and get stronger and get bulkier so that he can take a bit more of a pounding. And Archie really made it sound like, the added confidence even that he would get from improving his body in that way can help him as a player overall. What kind of insight can you give us just on what Archie kind of meant there and this whole kind of changing body storyline narrative this year? Is that kind of a unique one, or is that one that gets talked about maybe more often than we realize?
Yeah, I think it gets talked about every offseason because, it's even going back to when Tom Crean was the coach, we'd talk to him in the offseason on occasion, and he would talk about, the offseason strength and conditioning program and, what certain guys needed to do in terms of getting ready. And a lot of it always involved strength and conditioning in some capacity. This is a little bit different, obviously, because there's a new coaching staff taking over, and they may place maybe even bigger emphasis on certain things than the previous staff did. I don't know that for sure. I did get a chance, I think I maybe mentioned this last week, to meet Cliff Marshall at Hubers and talked with him a little bit. Just a really nice, really seems like a really passionate guy about strength and conditioning, kind of what he hopes to achieve with the program. But in terms of both of those guys specifically, it's no secret that Deron Davis, we'll get into Curtis Jones here in a second, but for Deron Davis first, no secret that one thing that limited his effectiveness last year was, one, injuries, but two, he wasn't in good enough shape to play major minutes, and that's obviously going to have to change this year with Thomas Bryant leaving the program. He's going to have to step into a bigger role and a big piece. That I don't think anyone really questioned Deron's effectiveness when he was on the court, but I think he was somewhat hampered by the fact that he just really wasn't able to go more than 15, 20 minutes. And this year it's going to have to be quite a bit more if Indiana is going to reach its potential. With Curtis Jones, I think Archie was more or less kind of laying, not a challenge, but just relaying that there's an opportunity for him to take a pretty big leap forward. You just kind of look at the roster, James Blackman Jr. going to the NBA draft, somebody's going to have to step in. And we've talked a little bit about scoring being a potential issue for this team. And you look at the roster and you kind of say, well, who could maybe pick up some of the slack? Well, Curtis Jones is one of the first guys that comes to my mind because he was a prolific scorer in high school at Huntington Prep and was really a pretty good scorer in the Nike EYBL circuit. But last year we saw him come out with that first game against Kansas where he was terrific, and then that was really the highlight of his whole season, which you don't really like to see for a freshman have their first game of their career, their best game of the whole season. That's kind of usually how opposite of how it works. You want to see guys come on as the season moves along, but his role really was more or less a fringe rotation guy by the end of the season. And I think Archie kind of, after evaluating him for a couple of months and talking to him, sees that for him to be able to take that leap forward, he thinks a big piece of that puzzle is for him to get stronger. I'm not sure if that would have been the case if there wasn't a coaching change. I don't know if that's what kind of the main emphasis would have been for him, but obviously this staff sees it as a priority to make him stronger, to be able to do some of the things they want him to be able to do. That's basically what Archie said in his comments. So, I think both of those guys, it's going to be important this offseason for them to embrace the plan. Anytime there's a coaching change, you want everybody on the same page, and these guys obviously need to buy into whatever it is they're being asked to do from the new staff if they want to be a major part of the puzzle moving forward.
You mentioned how Curtis was a prolific scorer in high school, and he was the highest rated of Indiana's incoming recruits. I think he even jumped past Jerod Davis in the final rankings, at least on some sites. And we saw the flash of it against Kansas. What do you think was the biggest thing missing for Curtis last year? Was it a confidence issue? Was it just that, his body wasn't up to the pounding of a rigorous Big Ten schedule? Did he just never find his place on a team where a lot of guys kind of seemed out of place? To what do you attribute his struggles as a freshman?
I think a little bit of it was confidence. Some guys have a problem adjusting to, when you're coming in from being, somebody that kind of has the green light at all times in their high school and AAU teams, and they have to come in and accept a different role. There's an adjustment. You're used to starting, being kind of the guy in your team your whole life, and then all of a sudden you're the 7th or 8th, 9th man on your college team, and you're having to come in off the bench. It's just a different approach. So there's an adjustment period. And I think really as the season went along, to me, and this is just my opinion, you can chime in if you want, but it seemed like he lost some of his confidence. And when he did get in, he was more worried about making a mistake and potentially getting pulled than he was just kind of sticking with what he did best. His turnover rate was pretty high. As I mentioned in that story today, he wasn't really very good in terms of being a spot-up shooter, which needs to be a strength of his, given that he's put on the floor primarily to shoot from the perimeter. Only shooting 35% from beyond the three-point line, I think, is something that he'll want to improve on. But I just think by the end of the season, he looked like a guy that was kind of lost in terms of what he was supposed to be doing out there and kind of what his role was. So I think the hope for Indiana fans has to be that with this new staff and with an opportunity maybe for a fresh start, that he's able to find his niche on the roster a little bit better than he was able to a season ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's absolutely imperative that he does. You and I have spent some time talking about this, and I know I've talked about it on several episodes of the Assembly Call, but when you look at this roster, Jerod Davis, probably the most indispensable player, just because there's no one to back him up, and there would be a huge void inside if he's not there. Robert Johnson, the experienced leader, you would think the go-to scorer on next year's team. Juwan Morgan, if he can stay healthy, probably the best two-way player. You could probably make an argument that he might even be the most valuable player given what he can do on both ends if he stays healthy. But you start looking at it, and Curtis Jones, to me, really seems like an X factor for this team. The guy that could, swing the season a couple games in either direction, because what Indiana's really going to need is scoring and reliable scoring, and especially, with shooting from the outside. And he's a guy who could potentially give that if he can recapture some of that magic from his high school days and some of what we saw against Kansas and some of the energy that we saw, for example, in the first half of the Michigan State game when I thought he was really good. And I just think he could add such a different dimension that not a lot of other guys on the team could provide, that it's so important for him to take that next step. And again, I think if he can, it could really be huge for Indiana. And if he can't, there's going to be a real hole there that I'm not sure anybody else is going to be able to fill.
Yeah, I think one thing with him and Devontae Green and obviously Jerod Davis, you look at those three guys and you see that there's a lot of upside with all of them. Whereas I'm not saying that Robert Johnson can't get a lot better going into the season. I think he's going to make improvements, but we kind of know what he's going to be. Same thing with Josh Newkirk. I think he can be better, but is he going to make a huge leap? I'm not really sure that there's a huge leap for him to make. Whereas with Green and Jones, you kind of say, all right, these guys came in as freshmen. They didn't necessarily have their feet completely under them. They didn't necessarily have a defined role. I mean, both of those guys were playing behind Robert Johnson, Blackman, and Newkirk for the entire year. So maybe if some minutes and opportunity open up and they can make big leaps forward, then Indiana's potential as a team increases quite a bit. Because, as I said, with Newkirk, I'm not saying that he's not going to be a more effective player. I just don't know that he has the ceiling, maybe, is the best way to put it. I'm not sure that he has the same ceiling as Jones or Green.
Yeah, it's a good point. So speaking of looking ahead to next year and guys who could really impact Indiana's ceiling as a team, we have the incoming freshmen who are arriving on campus this week, I think. Are they here yet, or are they arriving next week?
They're here.
They're here. Okay, so that's Al Durham, Justin Smith, and Clifton Moore. And I got this question for the Twitter Q&A portion of Assembly Call Radio last week, and I thought it was a good one, so I want to get your thoughts on it. Someone asked, what will constitute a successful summer for these freshmen? Because we heard a lot during last season. Deron Davis had to miss the summer program, finishing up some academic work in Colorado, got to campus basically with the rest of the freshmen, and then it felt like we were talking about, conditioning issues and other kind of catch-up issues with him for the rest of the season. So all three of Indiana's freshmen, getting there now, which is a good sign. What will it mean for those guys to have a successful summer? What does that look like for a freshman arriving on campus at a big-time college basketball program?
Well, there's several aspects to it. First is just getting acclimated to a new environment, getting up to speed academically. There's an adjustment for anybody. I mean, that's not just college basketball guys. That's you and I when we got to college, and anyone else that's going to a new place for the first time. I mean, there's an adjustment period. You're getting used to being around different people that you haven't been around before. So, just becoming comfortable with that, I think, is a really important thing. And, obviously in major college athletics, you're around people doing things at all times. So it makes it easier to kind of adjust to that. So I think just that's first and foremost. And then from a basketball perspective, all three of those guys really need to become tight with Cliff Marshall. I mean, he's really the one that has the most impact with the players over the summer. I mean, the coaching staff is around and they can work with guys, they can meet with guys on a limited basis. But Cliff Marshall is the one that really works with them the most. I mean, that was, we talked previously about Lionel Anderson and his, relationships with some of the players and how strong those were. These guys need to, now build relationships, and they're coming in fresh, so they didn't really have any relationship with the previous strength and conditioning coach other than visits. But they need to really get on the same page with Cliff Marshall. I'm sure, just based on what I know of the organization of the coaching staff and how organized Archie Miller is, he's probably got specific plans for each guy that he's already talked over with Cliff and with the guys as they come in. And so they're going to have different objectives. I would say for Clifton Moore, that's going to be adding a significant amount of muscle to his frame. I mean, you look at him and he's just oozing with potential, but he's really skinny. So he's going to need to bulk up significantly if he wants to have a role next season. Al Durham, I think the biggest thing for him is going to be just refining his perimeter shot a little bit more. It's something that, I've seen him shoot really well, but consistency is going to be a thing for him. I think he's going to be able to make an impact with his ability to defend and get to the basket, but he needs to develop a more reliable, consistent jump shot. And then with Justin Smith, I just think it's continuing to work on his motor. I mean, he's already a guy that's really athletic and goes hard most of the time, but he just needs to become relentless, regardless of what his role is next year. If it's, one of the first guys off the bench, whether it's starting particular at certain times, he's got to be able to be going with a full burst at all times on the floor, because that's really what his strength is. I mean, he's an athletic guy that can get above the rim. He can make plays in transition. He's strong. He's got a really good base from a strength and conditioning standpoint. So I would say those are kind of at a high level some of the things I would look for each of those guys to work on this offseason as they get acclimated. But most of all, I mean, I think it's just really just come in and build a bond with your teammates, get used to your surroundings, get a good start academically, and get ready for the fall, because that's when the real fun begins. Because late September, early October, when practice begins, that's when the coaching staff can really get their hands on these guys and start to mold a team, and they better be ready to go at that point, because once that hits, it's pretty much nonstop until the end of the season.
Yes, it is. So the coaching staff right now, they're obviously focused on recruiting, and Archie Miller's got a lot of work to do, obviously, with a lot of scholarships to fill for next year, and then starting to lay the groundwork for, classes for the future, the 2019, 2020 classes. But there's also an open scholarship right now for the 2017 season, which obviously a little bit of a surprise. And there was talk that, Nas Carter might be a guy that could fill that scholarship, a guy who signed a letter of intent with Archie at Dayton. David Moretti from Italy, he took a visit to Bloomington, but both of those guys have ended up signing elsewhere. Nas Carter with Washington, David Moretti with Texas Tech. So where does that leave Indiana now for filling that 2017 scholarship? Is there anybody else on the radar screen, and kind of what do you think the chances are that Indiana enters the season just rolling with those 12 scholarship players and the 13th one open?
It's tough to say for sure because you never really know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of there's probably still some grad transfers out there that we don't know about. I'm not sure how impactful any of those guys would be at this point. And I don't think you're going to have a Nick Zeisloft or a Max Bielfeldt fall in your lap this late, but you never know. And then the one name that kind of still sticks out is Erik Ayala, who is still undecided whether he will go 2017 or 2018. I think that could go further into the summer, but he has mentioned, I think it was a recent Rivals.com story, that Indiana's been on him as hard as anybody and has been involved in his recruitment. So if he makes the decision that he wants to go 2017, I definitely think he's a player that Indiana would want to consider. But just based on what Archie said at Huber's, I don't think the scholarship's burning a hole in his pocket. He kind of made the comment that, scholarships are gold. And he also said, at his hiring press conference that he kind of looks at having, maybe a smaller roster than 13, keeping some flexibility. And I think that's always a good thing to do because you never know what situation could arise because now with how grad transfers are being handled around college basketball, it really is kind of like free agency for college basketball in the offseason. And if a guy does come open and you're oversigned or you're at the limit, in May or June, and you don't have that flexibility, you could really end up costing yourself a guy that could help you and doesn't take up a scholarship for multiple years. So keeping that one spot open, I don't think would necessarily be a bad thing. But if you do that, then you've really got to make sure that the guys you're rolling with are going to be enough to get you through the season. And, I think the one thing I think Indiana fans would like to see is a little bit more size, a little more depth in the post, but that's at a premium in college basketball right now. And it's not like you can just go out and get a capable big man at the snap of the finger. I think that's one of the things looking at the 2018 recruiting board that people have brought up to me is like, where's the big men? And my response has been there's not a lot of talent in the 2018 class in terms of big guys. So it's going to be really important, I think, long-term that Deron Davis is able to stay healthy and develop over these next couple of years because he's going to have a huge role.
Yeah, no question. One thing people have talked about, and I want to know if this is even really feasible, like let's say that they don't fill the scholarship for 2017. Could Zach McRoberts be given the scholarship for one season with the understanding that, hey, once next season comes, we're going to open that scholarship back up for a recruit or a grad transfer? Like, is that possible? Would that at all go against the the whole student athlete bill of rights that Indiana has, and is that even a feasible option, do you think?
I don't know how that works. Usually I don't know the ins and outs of the student athlete bill of rights or the rules from the NCAA perspective. I think, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure if I am wrong, somebody will correct us either on Twitter in the comments, which is totally fine. But
yeah, let us know.
I think that if a guy comes in on scholarship, you can't take them off and then put them back on. But if someone comes in as a walk-on and you want to give them a scholarship for a year and then take them back off, I think that is something that can be done. However, I think most of the time when that happens, it's usually like a senior that's a walk-on and you have an open spot. I remember last year, I think Andrew Dockich, Michigan, had an empty scholarship, and they knew it was going to be his last year there, so they gave him a scholarship for part of the year. And but I don't I don't know exactly how that works, and I don't know what Archie's philosophy is on giving walk-ons scholarships. So I guess it's something that could be under consideration if it comes to that. But I don't know how to answer that for sure.
Yeah. In other recruiting news, kind of looking forward, the other big news was Brandon Johns. I believe he's from Lansing, Michigan, right there in Michigan State's backyard. He came to Bloomington on a visit. From all accounts, at least that I've read, it sounds like it was a very positive visit. He's a top 100 guy, 6'7" guy, not overly tall, but seems like a pretty skilled, versatile guy. What can you tell us about his recruitment and where that stands?
Yeah, he's a kid from East Lansing, so he's right there in Michigan State's backyard. And when I was at the EYBL in April in Indianapolis, I mean, Michigan State had all hands on deck there watching him, along with Keon Brooks. He plays on the Spiece Indy Heat team with Keon Brooks. He was a impressive guy. He's kind of dropped down, I think, recently a little bit in the rankings, in the most recent scout rankings. I think he comes in at number 100, but it seems like he's open to leaving Michigan, even though he's right there in Michigan State's backyard. I know Michigan's recruited him pretty hard too, but he did visit Purdue and Indiana over the weekend. So it doesn't seem like he's going to get out of the Big Ten footprint, but he was a impressive, versatile forward. My limited viewing of him, I came away with a kind of a positive feeling about him, and it'll be interesting to see how Indiana continues to get involved there. Seems like they've positioned themselves in a pretty solid way just 3 months into being on the job, and the fact that they offered him a scholarship tells me that there's some legitimate interest there, and he was on campus, so he's obviously interested in the pitch. And some guys, just being from Michigan State's backyard, maybe he just wants to get out and branch out a little bit, do something different. The fact that he's been recruited this long by Michigan State and Michigan that hasn't made a decision tells me that he's not exactly sold on either one of those schools as where he's going to end up for sure. So Indiana, he would be a really good addition to the 2018 class, I feel like, if it comes to that.
Is there anything notable to discuss about the guards in that class? I mean, obviously Darius Garland is a guy that every IU fan has their eye on, and that there seems to be some mutual interest there. Then Robert Finnessy, another guy from the state of Indiana that Indiana's been after for a while. And then Jalen Carey, another guy who's on the radar screen that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it seems like he's having a really productive summer and could be a guy who's in the mix there. Any new news with any of those guys?
Well, Jalen Carey, we posted some highlights of him recently. I mean, he's just really impressive to me. I'm surprised he's not ranked higher. Explosive guard that can score in a variety of ways. Finnessy, I saw recently at the Indiana Junior All-Star game, exhibition game, was really good at the game in New Albany. He's a kid that just really, I feel like, he's not that five-star talent, but he could come in and be your point guard for 4 years, much like maybe not as good of a prospect as a Yogi Ferrell, but he can give you that stability, I feel like, at the position. I think he's a solid top 75 player in the country. I feel confident saying that just based on what I saw in April, some of the shoe circuit events. Finnessy was really impressive. And Darius Garland, he's obviously a high priority for all the programs recruiting him. He had a terrific camp over in Italy, the Adidas Euro camp. Romeo Langford also participated in that. Darius Garland was one of the top scorers from that event, which is interesting to me that he went to the Adidas event, given that he's always played with Nike on the grassroots, but an opportunity to go overseas, hard to turn that down and play in front of some NBA personnel and with some of the top players in the country. It'll be interesting to see if Indiana gets him on campus for a visit, because I know he recently went to Duke for a visit. I think the next step kind of for Indiana is getting him on campus with the new coaching staff and seeing how things go from there, because he did visit previously under the old coaching staff, but has not been to Bloomington with the new staff. So I think he's obviously a high priority at this point, would be a terrific get. But, I don't think if they end up with just getting Finnessy and not Garland, I don't think that's anything to hang your head over, because I think both of those guys are going to be terrific at the college level.
So last topic for this week's episode, Alex, is the schedule. And obviously we are awaiting Indiana's non-conference schedule. We've seen, other non-conference schedules be released from other programs. Not all that surprising that with a new coaching staff, it might take Indiana a little bit longer to put the entire non-conference schedule together. But we do have, obviously several highlights on that non-conference schedule, with Duke coming to Bloomington as part of the Big Ten ACC Challenge, playing at Seton Hall. And then, of course, the games against Louisville and Notre Dame that we already knew about. Do you have any timetable for when you expect that schedule to be out, and just any thoughts right now on those big games that we already know about, and then maybe anything that you're hearing about what some of those other games may look like? Will it be a parade of sub 300 cupcakes, or do we expect, as has kind of been discussed since Archie took over, that even in this first season that he'll try to schedule a little bit tougher?
Excuse me. I think the one you missed there was South Florida, maybe. That one's kind of been out there.
Yeah.
They're going to be a home game. I think that's going to be a part of like a 4-team exempt event, which like in the past has been like the Indiana Classic or the Hoosier Classic or whatever it's been. So that'll probably be South Florida, and then 3 lesser opponents as home games. This schedule is going to be interesting because going to Seton Hall, Louisville, hosting Duke, and playing Notre Dame on a neutral court for 4 games that are really tough for the non-conference schedule. So it's almost like it's one of those things where you don't want to be too ambitious on the other games. It'd be nice to get some teams like in that 150 to 225, 250 range to go on the schedule. But the thing I think a lot of people don't realize on these guarantee games, and one reason why Indiana had so many of the sub 300 games previously, is it's hard to get some of these programs to agree just to come to Bloomington without a return game if you're not going to pay a pretty hefty sum. Now, I'm not sure if what was discussed between Fred Glass and Archie Miller when he took the job in terms of scheduling. I know they want that to be beefed up, but with that has to come a commitment from the athletic department that they're going to pay more for guarantee games, because a team that's maybe ranked a little bit higher from a better conference is going to want more to come to Bloomington without a return. So I hope going forward that's something that we see more often, because I think Archie seemed very savvy to kind of quote unquote hacking a good RPI schedule. I mean, that's really kind of what you have to do as your director of basketball operations is really key in this. But and I think Andy would be a really good person to talk to about this as well. Just kind of the importance of being able to more or less game the system to get a good RPI, because that's more or less what it is. I mean, you want to be able to get as many wins as you can, but you want to get as many wins, in the top 150, top 200, as opposed to these, really bottom feeding games that don't bring anything to the table. I think ideally you kind of want to get teams in the top 200, maybe at the lower end there that you can beat, but also aren't going to be damaging to your RPI. I mean, and I think, from our standpoint, you do a post game show after every game. I know there's times when we've talked that you felt like in November and December that you're doing the same thing over and over. What are you talking about? I mean, you're talking about Savannah State, or you're talking about these teams that Indiana's beaten by 30 or 40. What are you really getting out of that? So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of develops over a long period of time. I would think in the next couple of months for sure we'll have the non-conference schedule. As you mentioned, it might be a little bit longer than they would have liked just based on playing catch up and getting the new staff in there. But I think it's going to be a welcome change for fans just to get a little bit better quality opponents in Assembly Hall going forward.
Yeah, for what it's worth, South Florida last year, 292nd in KenPom, but I believe they also had a ton of player issues with guys leaving. Orlando Antigua was their coach for the last 3 years. He now, I believe, is the lead assistant under Brad Underwood at Illinois, and was previously at Kentucky, I think.
Yeah, and the connection there with South Florida, I think, might be that I think Brian Gregory, the coach who was at Georgia Tech that Josh Pastner replaced, was at Dayton before going to Georgia Tech. So there may be some relationship there with him and the director of basketball operations, Bill Komar, who came with Archie from Dayton. That might have a lot to do with getting that on the schedule. I mean, even if South Florida is not a very good team, they're still from at least a respectable league.
Yeah.
You at least have heard of them. They're going to play other good teams throughout the season, so it's a chance that if they're not horrible, that they could have a decent RPI. Whereas, some of these teams that we've seen in recent years, I mean, they're playing in these really bottom feeder conferences, just brought nothing to the table from a fan satisfaction perspective, and people didn't enjoy going to these games, which is why you saw a lot of empty seats. And they also didn't really help the team improve, and they also didn't help the RPI. So other than just checking a win, on your resume, they really brought nothing to the table.
So last question, you included this in your Around the Hall news roundup, but there is talk of the Big Ten going to a 20-game schedule. Obviously we'll never get to, I think, everybody's dream of a 26-game full round-robin schedule, the full round-robin like back in the old days when everybody played home and away. That'll certainly never happen, but it sounds like adding 2 more games, that would at least make the conference standings about 10% more accurate. Just allow, I think, for the regular season to be a more accurate reflection of the differences between the teams. What do you think are the chances of this, and what would the benefits and drawbacks be of going to a 20-game Big Ten schedule?
Well, I think the chances seem high because Tom Izzo said that he had a feeling that's the direction they were going, and for the most part, when Tom Izzo speaks, I listen because he's obviously the most tenured coach in the league, and
except when it comes to the job security of other coaches.
Well, there are exceptions. I said for the most part. Yeah. Okay, there was a caveat, but I'm torn on this. On one hand, I'd love to see a more balanced schedule because there's been years where the Big Ten championship has been determined by scheduling. When you have that many teams and you have an 18-game schedule, it's going to happen every year where one team has an advantage, and you hate to see a championship being won by a team that had an easier path, but that's kind of just how some things go. On the flip side of it is, they add more games, and you wonder, does the non-conference schedule become even less relevant? Do some of these marquee games go away? Does the Big Ten ACC Challenge, say the ACC and the Big Ten both go to 20-game schedule? Do they get rid of the ACC Big Ten Challenge? Do things like the Gavitt games go away? Does the possibility for an IU Kentucky or an IU Arizona series, does that kind of take a hit with a bigger schedule? So, I can see pluses and minuses to both. Personally, I would like to see the conference schedule mean more. I would like to see at least some kind of protected rivalries within the league. Indiana and Purdue playing twice every year, Michigan State playing twice every year, things like that. And I would like to see more meaning given to the regular season championship because it's a pretty significant accomplishment to go through a schedule and win a league title. I would just like to see the schedules even more balanced than they are now, which is it's impossible to do with 14 teams playing an 18-game schedule. It's just not going to happen. So anything they can do, can we have it both ways, Jerod? Can we just how about we have all really good non-conference games and then 20 Big Ten games? Would that work?
Yeah, just play a 26-game Big Ten schedule. Then let's play Kentucky and Arizona and the Crossroads Classic. Yeah, and ACC Big Ten Challenge. Talk about a dream for someone who hosts a post-game show.
For some reason, I don't think coaches around the country are going to agree to that because they want to have their standard baseline of 5 to 6 wins that they're going to get just by showing up to the gym. But, I just think I think in a lot of ways, college basketball – for us, that cover Indiana and for Indiana fans, it's not a niche sport because Indiana fans follow it year round. I mean, they're passionate as anybody. They're engaged. They want to know everything that's going on. But I think one thing college basketball has, one problem it has on a national level is there is a segment of fans who only turn in to the season once NFL wraps up. And I would like to see the sport become a little bit more relevant on the national stage, and anything you can do to kind of drum up more interest throughout the season, because it doesn't feel like nationally the college basketball gets a lot of love until later in the season. So maybe by improving the matchups earlier in the season, by playing more meaningful games, you can get more casual fans interested in the game potentially. But I think ultimately this all comes down to money. The Big Ten would look at adding more games because they think they can make more money off of it. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah. By the way, if they do ever protect rivalries, I would just move that Rutgers does not actually have a rival in the Big Ten, because that would be an unfair advantage for whoever gets to be their quote-unquote rival. And, I mean, it's Rutgers. They don't really have a rival in the Big Ten.
No, they don't. That's the problem with these protected rivalries, because I think there's some schools that probably feel like, hey, we don't really have one. I mean, would Illinois be Northwestern? I mean,
or us.
Yeah. I mean, Ohio State is probably Michigan, right? But Michigan's is also Michigan State. So it's like, do you force Michigan to play Michigan State and Ohio State twice a year? I don't think you can do that. Who's Wisconsin's? Is Wisconsin's Minnesota? I mean, there's so many. That'd be an interesting episode. We could just kind of go through
well, that would be kind of fun.
Try to come up with our. I think Indiana and Purdue is obviously the most. Indiana, Purdue, and Michigan State are the two most notable. Am I missing anybody?
Not anybody obvious.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like Maryland's another one. I mean, Maryland. Who do you put with them? I mean, they've been an ACC team throughout their existence. I mean, here's an idea. Let's make Maryland play Duke twice every year. Even though the Duke's not in the league, just let Maryland play Duke twice. I mean, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd be okay with that.
There you go. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how these leagues kind of evolve over the next couple of years, because it seems like we're moving further and further away from the little guys in college basketball having a say. I mean, even Gonzaga and Butler have kind of elevated themselves to the big boy table. It doesn't seem like there's really very many true mid-major programs anymore in college basketball, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. It is. Well, look at that. It's a slow news week in the middle of the summer, and we still got over 38 minutes of interesting, engaging Indiana talk. That is the beauty of covering Indiana basketball in the offseason.
Yeah, no offense to our guests, but it's always fun to just chat amongst ourselves every once in a while. And like you said, I talked at the beginning of the episode how this is a slow time, and we just talked about 40 minutes, and I feel like we could probably go 20 more minutes if we really wanted to. So
we could. We didn't even get to everything that was on my list.
There we go.
We'll save that for the future. I know we've got a couple of interesting guests in the works, so we'll look to get those guests on in the next few weeks. And if you have any topic suggestions, ideas that you want us to spend an episode talking about, like who are the rivalries in the Big Ten, just shoot us a tweet at Assembly Call or at Inside the Hall and let us know, because we always appreciate your input, and that helps us plan these episodes.
Yep.
And with that, Alex, always great talking to you, and we'll be back next week.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool. Talk to you then, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We'll be back next week with another brand new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.